The rain had been falling for hours, leaving the streets of Brookhaven slick with a mirror-like shine. Detective Claire Harlow adjusted the collar of her trench coat as she stood outside the old courthouse, staring at the crime scene before her. Her prominent defense attorney, Richard Mason, had been found dead in his office, slumped across his desk with a single bullet wound to the chest. The details were chilling. No sign of forced entry, no fingerprints on the gun, no surveillance footage of anyone entering the building after hours. Whoever had killed Mason had known what they were doing. Claire stepped inside, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The office smelled faintly of gunpowder and old books. On Mason's desk, the gun lay neatly placed beside a manila envelope. The envelope contained court documents, sealed, records from a case Mason had won 10 years earlier, a case involving the disappearance of a teenage girl. Claire's instincts screamed that this was no ordinary murder. Mason had been silenced, and the motive was buried in his past. By the next morning, the entire city buzzed with rumors. Mason was not just any lawyer. He was wealthy, influential, and notorious for winning impossible cases. But as Claire dug into his past, she discovered enemies hidden beneath his polished surface. First on her list was Evelyn Grant, the grieving mother of the missing teenage girl Anna. 10 years ago, Mason had defended the prime suspect, Evelyn's neighbor, and won an acquittal. Anna's body was never found, and the case went cold. Evelyn had never forgiven him. When Claire visited Evelyn's home, she found the woman sitting in a dimly lit living room, her walls lined with photographs of her lost daughter. Evelyn's eyes burned with hatred as she spoke. "Richard Mason didn't just win that case," she said bitterly. "He buried the truth. He protected a monster." Claire pressed her for details, but Evelyn shook her head. "Ask Mason's clients. Ask who paid him. Then you'll understand why he's dead." Outside, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn knew more than she admitted. The threads of Mason's murder were tangled in an older crime, and Claire was determined to unravel them. The deeper Claire went, the darker the trail became. She discovered that Mason had been blackmailing some of his own clients, powerful men who owed their freedom to his manipulations in court. One name appeared again and again: Victor Hale, a wealthy real estate mogul who had recently announced plans to build a luxury complex on the outskirts of Brookhaven. But Victor had a secret. 10 years earlier, he had been questioned in Anna Grant's disappearance. He claimed he had been out of town, and Mason himself had arranged his alibi. Now, with Mason dead, that connection seemed far from coincidental. Claire tracked Victor to his office downtown. He greeted her with a cold smile, dressed in an immaculate suit. "Detective," he said smoothly, "I assume this is about poor Richard. A tragedy, really. But you'd be wasting your time looking in my direction." Yet, as she glanced around his office, Claire noticed a framed photograph of Victor with Mason, dated only 2 weeks before the murder. The two men had been meeting in secret. Why? Her instincts told her Mason's death was a warning, and Victor Hale was at the center of it. Late that night, Claire received an anonymous email. No subject line, no sender, just a single attachment, a grainy video file. She opened it cautiously, her stomach tightening as the footage began to play. The video showed a dim basement. In the corner, a terrified girl sat bound to a chair, her face pale and bruised. A calendar on the wall read, October 2014, 10 years ago. The girl was Anna Grant, alive, terrified. The camera panned, revealing a man's voice. "No one will ever find you, Anna. Mason made sure of that." The figure stepped into the light, Victor Hale. Claire's pulse pounded in her ears. Mason hadn't just defended a guilty man, he had covered for Victor. And now that Victor's empire was at risk, Mason had become a liability. But the email ended with one final sentence: "If you want justice, follow the money." Claire pieced it together. Mason had begun threatening Victor, demanding money in exchange for his silence. But Victor was ruthless. Killing Mason was easier than paying him. The problem was proof. Without evidence, Victor would walk free again, just as he had a decade ago. The next morning, Claire returned to Mason's office and dug deeper through his files. Hidden behind a false drawer, she found a USB drive. Inside were recordings, conversations between Mason and Victor. One file caught her breath, Victor's voice, cold and confident. "You think you can blackmail me forever, Richard. You forgot. I don't pay debts. I erase them." It was enough. Claire secured a warrant, and by nightfall Victor Hale was in handcuffs, his empire collapsing around him. Evelyn Grant wept when she heard the news, clutching the photograph of her daughter. Justice had come, though years too late. As the city moved on, Detective Claire Harlow knew one thing: the shadows of Brookhaven held more secrets than anyone realized, and sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, it crawls back demanding to be heard.